the King and Queen in Canada on this Monday night. The fanfare and anticipation on this first visit by King Charles as monarch.
I was excited when I realized I was going to skip school for the King.
The message he's sending and how he's subtly affirming Canada's sovereignty as more Canadians support the monarchy.
It's so needed right now.
Why the reception to the royals has recovered. Plus a deadly strike on a school in Gaza sheltering civilians as Israel's government comes under fire from allies. Alberta's government seeks to ban some books from school libraries. What's driving the new policy?
Global National with Donna Friesen.
At an uncertain time in Canada's history, in walks the King. The symbolism of this two-day visit by King Charles and Queen Camilla is unmistakable. This is the true north, strong and free, and King Charles, as Canada's head of state, is here to reinforce that. Invited by newly elected Prime Minister Mark Carney, the King will deliver the speech from the throne tomorrow, opening a new session of Parliament. Good evening and thanks for joining us. King Charles wields soft power. He's not expected to publicly weigh in on President Trump's threats to Canada. As Mackenzie Gray reports, his presence alone sends a strong message.
A Canadian ovation that the royals have become accustomed to. Charles' 20th visit to Canada saw hundreds welcoming him to Ottawa, but it's his first as the King of Canada. And what's more Canadian than a road hockey game? Charles dropping the ceremonial puck alongside former Ottawa Senator Chris Phillips and Desiree Scott, a member of the women's national soccer team. For the kids who showcased our national pastime, today wasn't just about the hockey.
I was excited when I realized I was going to skip school for the King. I was actually really excited.
Queen Camilla joining the King while touring a local farmers market, including the Syrian bakery. Falafel and other treats made in Ottawa since 2016 when the Altoui family came to Canada as refugees.
A great day today for me, yes. I'm so happy. We have little stress. I don't know why, but I'm okay with my family here.
The Royals' 24-hour whirlwind trip comes at the request of the Prime Minister, who invited the King to deliver the throne speech, attempting to use the head of state to push back against U.S. President Donald Trump's sovereignty threats.
This is just so crucial that he projects to the world that Canada is strong, resilient, and free.
A sentiment shared by this monarchist from Maryland who traveled up from the U.S.
I'm a huge fan of Canada and very offended as an American by what the President of the United States has been saying about this wonderful country.
So excited, beyond excited.
You seen the King before?
No. 68 years. This is my big moment.
Other visitors going all out to try and catch the King's attention.
At this moment in time, it's really important. Our sovereignty is important, and our ties with Britain are important.
The King ended the day planting a tree at Rideau Hall before heading inside for an audience with the Prime Minister. That meeting an opportunity for the Prime Minister to outline the symbolism and substance of the throne speech that he's written, and determine, Donna, if the King will reference Donald Trump's sovereignty threats.
All right, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thanks. Queen Camilla kept with tradition and wore a maple leaf close to her heart, a diamond and platinum brooch that connects her to the past. The brooch was given by King George VI to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, in 1939, ahead of their first royal tour to Canada. Queen Elizabeth II inherited it, and she wore it on several Canadian tours. It's also been worn by Princess Catherine on 2 different trips to this country. A little later, have the threats from Donald Trump made more Canadians warm to the idea of the monarchy? We'll tell you what the latest polling shows. The business of Parliament officially resumes tomorrow when a new session gets underway. But before that, MPs needed to choose a new Speaker of the House. He is Francis Scarpaleggia, who has been a Liberal MP for the Montreal riding of Lac-Saint-Louis since 2004. As David Akin explains, he's promising to put an end to unparliamentary behaviour.
L'honorable député de Lac-Saint-Louis.
A tradition in Westminster-style parliaments, the Prime Minister and opposition leader drag a new speaker to the front of the House. It's a tradition from Parliament's beginnings in the Middle Ages, when a speaker could be punished for offending a king.
7 speakers were beheaded between 1394 and 1535, and many more were imprisoned.
In his winning campaign speech, Francis Scarpaleggia went further back in history to antiquity.
Our neighbor to the south may be modern-day Rome in size and power. We are Athens in culture, values, and democracy. That is how we must see ourselves. That is who we must be.
And it was a point that pleased the Prime Minister.
This House has rules. It has traditions. And it's on those traditions that our Athenian democracy is founded.
All 6 MPs who made a pitch for the $300,000 a year speaker's job promised to crack down on unparliamentary behavior. Scarpaleggia says he's up to playing hockey referee.
Canadians want to see sticks on the ice, and it's the responsibility of the Speaker to make this so.
But speakers have said that before. The last one, Liberal Greg Fergus, tried to enforce better behavior with frequent lectures. He once forced the Prime Minister to withdraw remarks. And Fergus became the first speaker ever to throw a leader of the official opposition out of the chamber.
Pursuant to the authority granted to me by Standing Order 11, I order you to withdraw from the House.
None of that made Fergus popular, and he was unsuccessful seeking re-election to the job. But Scarpaleggia thanked Fergus, saying Fergus had the job at a tough time in the parliamentary cycle.
At the end of a mandate, when things tend to get a little feistier, I would remind members that we are at the beginning of a mandate in the selfish hope that you will afford me a little grace period.
Scarpaleggia will see what grace he gets at his first question period Wednesday. David Akin, Global News, Ottawa.
The small town of Walkerton, Ontario has been deeply scarred by a terrible collision. 4 high school students and their coach were killed. They died in a multi-vehicle crash outside of London, Ontario on Friday. The group was heading home from a softball tournament. Noor Rafat is in Walkerton tonight.
Yeah, I think we're all we don't have any words.
In southwestern Ontario, an air of sadness looms over Walkerton District Community School. Students gathered there Monday for the first time since losing their teacher and 4 of their classmates in a devastating crash.
It's been a very, very sad day, but it's also, I think, a day where people have been able to come together to grieve and collectively pause with one another while they work through their emotions.
Late Friday afternoon, an SUV carrying a 33-year-old coach and 4 teenage girls was driving back home to Walkerton from a softball tournament in Dorchester, east of London. The SUV collided with a transport truck and another vehicle. No one in the SUV survived. Through social media posts, several sports teams are remembering coach Matt Eckert and students Olivia Rourke, Rowan McLeod, Cadence Ford, and Danica Baker.
They were known all to be as very helpful, kind, happy-go-lucky, athletic students.
Sunday night, close to 1,000 people attended a vigil outside the school for those killed.
It hits home and, makes you feel really unweary knowing that, it could have been your kid that was in that vehicle.
As the grief lingers, the local school board says it is ready to support the students and staff.
The tragedy response team is here today and will be throughout the week.
All over town, residents placing sneakers outside their homes in a shared sense of community. In a statement to Global News on Monday, the president of Blue Water Ballistics Volleyball Club, where Danica Baker played, said that no words could capture the loss suffered by the community, but that the community coming together will hopefully help those impacted. Donna?
Noor Rafat in Walkerton, Ontario, thanks. A British man has been arrested after a vehicle hit pedestrians celebrating Liverpool Football Club's championship win. Police say they are not treating it as terrorism. Emergency crews responded to reports of a car hitting the crowd shortly after the team bus drove through the city centre. Tens of thousands of fans had gathered along the 16-kilometre-long parade route. No one was killed. 27 people were taken to hospital, including 4 children. 2 people suffered serious injuries. The Kremlin says President Trump may be suffering from emotional overload, a pushback against Trump's social media post Sunday that Russia's president has gone absolutely crazy. Russia has launched a fierce aerial assault on Ukraine, killing at least 12 people. And Trump, who rarely speaks harshly about Vladimir Putin, says he doesn't like it at all. Jackson Proskow reports.
For a third consecutive night, Russia launched a deadly wave of drones at Ukraine, marking what Kyiv said was the biggest attack yet, involving hundreds of drones as part of Moscow's deadly escalation. We woke up from the sound of an explosion, says this young mother. I immediately grabbed my child. I covered it in a blanket and protected it.
I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin.
The attacks upended President Donald Trump's hopes for the peace deal he promised to deliver.
We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all.
In a social media post, Trump went further and said Putin has gone absolutely crazy, before proceeding to lob equal blame at Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, saying everything out of his mouth causes problems. The Kremlin dismissed Trump's remarks as the result of emotional overload, insisting a Russian peace proposal is still being drafted. European leaders are increasingly skeptical that any progress will happen.
Russia is not interested in peace. So during the day, Putin talks about negotiations. Then he bombs Ukraine during the night.
Germany announced it was lifting range restrictions on weapons supplied to Ukraine, allowing Kyiv to attack military positions inside Russia, which the Kremlin called dangerous. While the EU has called on the US to bolster Ukraine and acknowledged that Moscow is not interested in a deal. The EU is preparing possible new sanctions against Russia ahead of an expected visit by Zelensky to Germany later this week. While here in Washington, Trump's surprising criticism of Putin is tempered by the fact that he's still not demanding concessions from Russia and is still suggesting Ukraine shares the blame for being invaded. Donna?
Jackson Proskow in Washington. Thanks, Jackson. Crowds of far-right Israelis marched through East Jerusalem today, chanting insults and assaulting Palestinians and storming the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's the annual march celebrating Israel's capture and occupation of East Jerusalem and its holy sites in 1967. More than 1,500 people forced their way into the mosque compound, considered the third holiest site in Islam. Jews call it the Temple Mount and consider it the holiest site in Judaism. The marchers held up banners reading 2025 Gaza in our hands, and some chanted death to Arabs. Israel's war in Gaza has seriously escalated tensions. Tonight, both Israel and the U.S. are dismissing reports of a ceasefire deal, and in Gaza, Israel is not letting up. Another night of airstrikes killed at least 45 people, including many at a school where displaced people were sheltering. Redmond Shannon reports, and a warning, some of the images in his story are upsetting.
A horrifying image. A 7-year-old girl tries to escape the flames after an Israeli airstrike on Gaza City. Witnesses who were sheltering in the school told a team working for Global News that there was no warning before the strikes. They spoke of charred bodies everywhere, including women and children. Word al-Sheikh Khalil, the girl from the flames, survived, relatively unharmed, at least physically. Her uncle says it is a miracle she is alive. The daily killings and scenes of hunger in Gaza are further eroding support among Israel's allies. The language from its second largest military donor is the most frustrated yet.
What the Israeli army is doing now in the Gaza Strip, frankly, I don't understand anymore. It can no longer be justified by claiming a fight against Hamas.
To the south, a new wave of evacuations toward the coast. This woman says at this point she is just waiting to die. She says despite the partial resumption of aid deliveries last week, she got nothing. She says aid is being stolen and sacks of flour are being sold for more than $500. A US-backed plan to distribute aid using private contractors at hubs protected by Israeli troops is scheduled to begin soon. The UN and aid agencies say they won't take part. And now the American set to lead it has quit. Jake Wood said the plan wouldn't uphold the humanitarian principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality and independence. The Israeli Defense Forces say the evacuation of most of southern Gaza is to facilitate what it calls an unprecedented attack to destroy the capabilities of terrorists. Donna?
Redmond, Shannon, thank you. Alberta's controversial plan to ban some books. Coming up, the topics being targeted in school libraries. A judge has approved a $500 million settlement in a class action lawsuit that accused Loblaw and its parent company, George Weston, of fixing the price of bread. The scheme was first made public in 2017 when the Competition Bureau announced an investigation. It found several major bread producers and retailers colluded to artificially inflate bread prices for more than a decade. Customers who bought bread between 2001 and 2021 and did not already accept a gift card from Loblaw will eventually receive up to $25. The Alberta government is planning to impose new content guidelines for school libraries. The province wants to prohibit some books it deems are not age appropriate. The education minister says consistent standards are needed after books with sexually explicit content were available to students in elementary and high schools in Calgary and Edmonton. Heather Yurix-West reports.
This is not a question of banning specific books or specific titles.
But the Alberta government says it will have new rules around what school libraries can and cannot make available this fall.
In some instances, sexually explicit material has made their way onto school library shelves, raising significant concerns for parents.
The province pointing to 4 graphic novel titles it says it found in K-9 and high school libraries in Calgary and Edmonton that contain references to sexual activity, self-harm, and sexual abuse. The Calgary Board of Education and Edmonton Public Schools say they're pulling the books in question to review their content, adding that coming-of-age books available for students to choose independently have historically been topics of discussion.
Libraries spend a lot of time ensuring that we have robust reconsideration of material policies. The way to achieve these goals is to ensure that you have those trained staff and that there's funding for those trained staff.
This isn't an Alberta issue alone. In recent years, the push to censor books in the libraries has increased significantly across the United States, with most of the complaints centering around sexual or pro-LGBTQ2S+ content. In this country, the Canadian Federation of Library Associations recently published a study that found that prior to 2020, most of the content complaints were related to racism. But since the pandemic, that's changed to mainly sexual or pro-LGBTQ2S+ content complaints as well.
I think we all know that we're in a political climate where there's been a bit of a backlash against LGBTQ and trans communities, and so I think we're seeing that reflected in a lot of concern.
The Alberta government will be collecting public feedback as it drafts the new library rules via an online survey until June 6th. Heather Yurix-West, Global News, Calgary.
Ahead, spectacular scenes as Hawaii's most active volcano does its thing. One of the world's most active volcanoes is at it again. Kilauea in Hawaii spewed fountains of lava up to 300 meters high. That's almost the height of the Eiffel Tower. The volcano's activity has been on the increase since December, with eruptions lasting from hours to days. Sweden's Volvo car company says it is slashing 3,000 jobs to help cut costs. Volvo says that's about 15% of its office-based workforce. The cuts are part of a $2.6 billion plan to deal with tough market conditions. High costs, slowing demand, and global trade tensions are putting pressure on the entire auto industry. Royal revival next. Are Canadians growing more fond of the monarchy? Tomorrow, King Charles will read the speech from the throne and open the latest session of Parliament. Overshadowing this visit is the uncertain future of global trade, thanks to the American president, who has also talked about making Canada the 51st state. He hasn't repeated that line lately, but Canadians have not forgotten. And one institution that appears to be benefiting from the threats to Canada's sovereignty is the monarchy. Heidi Petracek explains.
Thank you for coming to Canada, sir.
A royal visit to Canada always brings out crowds, but this time the arrival of King Charles is more than a social call.
Partly it will send a message to certain politicians.
Aaron Speidel met the late Queen Elizabeth II back in 1994. Now a staunch monarchist, he says this visit by the king is much different than his last in 2022, before Donald Trump's tariffs and references to Canada as the 51st state.
It would be a subtle reminder that we're independent, sovereign, that we have a long and varied and storied history.
Canadians have always had a complicated view of that history.
I have no interest in the monarchy. I find it's like a very outdated colonial thing.
But it seems more are leaning the other way these days.
We are different, for good or bad. At least our system's different.
A new Ipsos poll done exclusively for Global News found 66%, two-thirds of us, believe the monarchy helps differentiate Canada from the United States, up just 12% from 2023. And 56% agree the constitutional monarchy helps define Canadian identity. That's up from 48% in April 2023, which was the lowest point in 2 decades.
So actually what we're seeing as a result of what Donald Trump has been doing is that the royal family's on a bit of a roll.
The only time this century Canadian sentiment was nearly as high was in 2002, the late Queen's Golden Jubilee. And now there's more on the line.
It's a rare moment where the Canadian government is seeking to mobilize the monarchy in favor of Canadian sovereignty.
A royal show of support many Canadians seem to appreciate. Heidi Petrocic, Global News, Halifax.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Air Canada showcases the view of British Columbia's North Shore from Bowen Island, a birdhouse near Cochrane, Alberta, and the Tagish River in Tagish, Yukon. Please keep them coming. Send your pictures of Canadian pride to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.